A 10-year-old boy, faced with an impossibly hard puzzle, pulled his chair forward, rubbed his hands together, and cried out, "I love a challenge." That reaction changed Carol Dweck's research and may change the way you see yourself tonight. Welcome to Whispering Pages. If you're here just for the summary, skip to the next chapter. For the rest of us, let's ease in. Notice where your body meets the bed or chair. Feel the weight settling. The room is quiet and you're exactly where you need to be. Your brain is shifting into its most receptive state. What you absorb before sleep tends to consolidate and stick. Tonight, Mindset by Carol Dweck, 2006. The book that revealed how one simple belief about your ability shapes virtually everything you do. Let's begin. Carol Dweck spent decades as a researcher at Stanford studying one of the most fundamental questions in psychology. Why do some people thrive in the face of difficulty, while others collapse? She wasn't studying intelligence or talent in any traditional sense. She was studying belief, specifically, what people believed about their own abilities, and how those beliefs quietly shaped every choice they made. Her journey began with an observation that shook her. She brought children into a room one at a time, gave them increasingly hard puzzles, and watched. She expected some children to cope well with failure and others not to. What she didn't expect was a 10-year-old boy who rubbed his hands together in delight when the puzzles got hard, or a girl who looked up with a satisfied expression and said she had been hoping this would be informative. These children weren't performing optimism for the researcher watching them. They genuinely experienced difficulty as something exciting. Dweck realized she had never thought about challenge that way herself. That moment became the foundation of 30 years of research and one of the most influential ideas in modern psychology. Through that research, Dweck identified two fundamentally different ways people understand their own abilities. She called the first the fixed mindset. People who hold this view believe that their qualities, their intelligence, their talent, their character, are basically carved in stone. You have a certain amount of ability, and that amount doesn't change much. Every situation becomes a test of what you've got. Every test becomes a verdict. Am I smart or dumb? Talented or not? The fixed mindset creates constant pressure to prove yourself, because if your traits are fixed, then every challenge is a potential exposure. You avoid hard things because struggling might mean you're not as capable as you thought. You stick to what you're already good at. You work only as hard as you need to look smart, because if you had to work very hard at something, what would that say about your natural ability? The second mindset she called the growth mindset. People who hold this belief see their abilities as something that can be developed through effort, through strategy, through good teaching, through sustained engagement over time. They don't think anyone can become anything with enough effort. But they believe that a person's true potential is genuinely unknown, and that passion and training take people much further than most expect. Dweck illustrates the difference with a vivid thought experiment. Imagine you have a rough afternoon, a poor grade, a parking ticket, a friend who brushes you off on the phone. People with the fixed mindset respond with a global internal verdict. I am a failure. I am not good enough. And from that place they do what you'd predict, nothing useful. They stay in bed, give up, or look for distractions. People with the growth mindset respond to the same afternoon differently. They feel disappointed, of course, anyone would. But their internal reaction is immediate and practical. I need to study harder, pay the ticket, and check in with my friend tomorrow. They don't label themselves. They just move toward the next useful step. Here's what makes this significant. These two mindsets are not the same as optimism versus pessimism, or high self-esteem versus low self-esteem. A person with the fixed mindset can feel completely confident, right up until the moment something goes wrong. Then the whole structure collapses, because their confidence was built on the assumption that they had fixed, strong abilities, and difficulty seems to contradict that assumption. The growth mindset produces a more durable kind of confidence, one that doesn't depend on constant success, because struggle is expected. Most people assume the IQ test was designed to measure fixed, permanent intelligence. It was not. Alfred Binet invented it in early 20th century Paris to identify children who were falling behind in school, so that new educational programs could help them catch up. He believed deeply that effort and good teaching could fundamentally change how intelligent a child became. The fixed mindset interpretation of his test, the idea that it measured a permanent ceiling-limited trait, was a misreading that later researchers imported. Dweck's work put Binet's original intuition back on solid scientific ground. What makes these mindsets so powerful is that they don't just shape how you feel about intelligence. They shape everything: how you respond to failure, how hard you try, whether you seek honest feedback or avoid it, who you surround yourself with. Tonight we'll see how that plays out across effort and failure, sports, business, relationships, and parenting, and ultimately how the mindset itself can change. Once you understand the two mindsets, you start seeing them everywhere. But nowhere is the contrast sharper than in the meaning each mindset gives to failure and effort, because these are the two things at the very heart of whether someone grows or stays stuck. In the fixed mindset, failure is a verdict. When you believe your abilities are fixed, a failure doesn't just mean you fell short on a task. It means you've been measured, and what was measured wasn't enough. This is why people with the fixed mindset avoid challenge so fiercely. It's not laziness. It's a kind of rational self-protection. If I don't try, I can't truly fail, and my sense of self stays intact. Dweck traced this to real lives with real stakes. Bernard Loiseau was one of the most celebrated chefs in France, operating a 3-star restaurant with decades of critical acclaim. When rumors circulated that he might lose a Michelin star, and his score dropped in another respected guide, he took his own life. He had not actually lost anything yet. But the possibility that the verdict on his worth might shift was more than his fixed mindset could absorb. A man of enormous talent had built his entire identity on what he was, rather than on what he was doing and becoming. Contrast that with Jim Marshall, a defensive player for the Minnesota Vikings. During a game, Marshall spotted a loose ball, scooped it up, and ran 66 yards into his own end zone, scoring points for the opposing team on national television. It was one of the most humiliating moments in professional sport. What did Marshall do? At halftime, he pulled himself together. He told himself that when you make a mistake, you have to make it right. He played some of the best football of his career in the second half. His team won. In the growth mindset, failure is painful, but it is not a verdict. It is a problem to be faced and learned from. Now let's talk about effort, because here is where the research gets genuinely counterintuitive. In the fixed mindset, effort is not admirable. It is actually threatening. If you believe your abilities are innate, then needing to work hard implies that your natural ability might not be sufficient. Real talent is supposed to flow effortlessly. So visible, sustained effort becomes a kind of confession, evidence that maybe you're not the natural you want to be. Nadia Salerno-Sonnenberg made her violin debut with the Philadelphia Orchestra at age 10. By her late teens, However, she had developed a collection of bad habits and watched other students catch up to her. Her teacher, the legendary Dorothy DeLay, repeatedly tried to correct her, but Saleno Sonnenberg resisted every suggestion. Why? Because trying and then failing would remove her last line of defense. If she went to an audition fully prepared and genuinely tried, and she still didn't win, she'd have no excuse left. She had even stopped bringing her violin to lessons. DeLay finally gave her an ultimatum: bring the violin next week or leave. For the first time, the young violinist went all in, trained seriously, practiced without protecting herself, and won a major competition. People with the growth mindset understand effort completely differently. For them, effort is the engine of ability, not a last resort, but a first principle. Thomas Edison did not invent the light bulb alone in a flash of genius. He had 30 assistants working around the clock in a state-of-the-art laboratory, and the light bulb itself was a network of dozens of smaller inventions, each requiring sustained work over years. Darwin's masterwork took more than 20 years of field research and multiple drafts before it became the book we know. Mozart labored for over 10 years before producing any work we still admire today. The fixed mindset wants these facts explained away, because the story it needs is one of effortless natural genius. The growth mindset looks at the same facts and sees exactly what it expected: that mastery is the product of sustained engagement. Dweck followed students through the transition to junior high school, one of the most difficult periods academically. Students with the fixed mindset showed a clear decline in grades over the 2 following years. Students with the growth mindset showed improvement. Strikingly, before the transition, both groups had nearly identical academic records. The difference wasn't prior ability. It was what they did when things got harder. One boy in a mindset workshop, Jimmy, the most visibly disengaged student in the room, looked up with tears in his eyes and asked quietly, "You mean I don't have to be dumb?" From that day forward, he stayed up late to complete his homework, submitted assignments early to get feedback, and began to understand effort not as something that exposed weakness, but as something that built strength. Dweck applies the mindset framework across 3 major domains: sports, business, and relationships, and in each one the contrast between fixed and growth thinking plays out with real consequences for real people. In sports, the growth mindset produces what coaches often call character, the capacity to dig deeper precisely when the pressure is highest. Billie Jean King described watching a match during which her opponent mounted a dramatic comeback from a losing position. In that moment, King said she understood for the first time what a champion truly was. Someone who could raise their level of play when it mattered most, who could get harder and sharper under pressure rather than tighter and smaller. That quality was not a personality trait someone was born with. It was a capacity built over years of deliberate exposure to harder conditions. Mia Hamm, widely regarded as the greatest female soccer player of her generation, spent her entire career playing against people who were better than she was. As a child, she played with older boys. As a teenager, she joined teams with older, more experienced players. Her reason was always the same: she improved faster when she was outmatched than when she was comfortable. She described mental toughness, staying focused when the referees are against you, when you're exhausted, when everything seems to be breaking wrong, as something she was still working on in every practice. Not a trait she possessed, but a skill she was developing. John McEnroe tells a very different story. One of the most naturally talented tennis players in history, McEnroe almost never credited effort when things went well. When they went wrong, he almost never took responsibility. Every loss was attributed to something outside him: a noise from a camera crew, a backache, the emotional weather of a particular week. His on-court behavior was, by his own later admission, often a way of masking the moments when he lost his nerve. He knew it. And he did nothing about it, because the fixed mindset offers no map for improving the things you'd rather not look at directly. In business, the patterns are strikingly similar and the consequences are larger. Dweck contrasts the collapse of Enron with the companies Jim Collins identified in his research into what makes good organizations become genuinely great. Enron worshipped talent. It recruited from elite schools, paid its people extremely well, and built a culture in which being seen as brilliant was the primary currency. But when a culture makes intelligence the thing people are hired to display, it creates a world where no one can admit uncertainty or error, because doing so would undermine the image of effortless brilliance the culture demands. Problems get buried rather than addressed. Bad investments get doubled down on rather than cut. The result was one of the largest corporate collapses in American history. Dweck argues persuasively that its root was not corruption in the ordinary sense, but the fixed mindset spread across an entire organization. The companies Collins found had made the leap from good to great were run by leaders who looked almost nothing like the archetypal charismatic genius. They were modest. They asked searching questions and genuinely listened to the answers. They built teams of people more capable than themselves in key areas. They looked directly at failure and used it as navigational information. Collins was puzzled by what these qualities had in common. Dweck's answer is clear: they were the hallmarks of the growth mindset. Her analysis of Lee Iacocca illustrates the fixed mindset leader in precise detail. Iacocca genuinely saved Chrysler in the early 1980s, a real achievement requiring real skill. But success transformed him. He became consumed by the image of himself as a corporate savior, spending resources on things that enhanced his public profile while surrounding himself with supporters and driving away critics. When Japanese automakers were producing meaningfully better cars, his response was to lobby for tariffs and release statements of blame rather than innovate. He had confused the legend he had built with the ongoing work that made the legend possible. In relationships, the fixed mindset creates a specific kind of suffering. People who believe traits are permanent tend to expect that a good relationship should feel effortless, that the right partner should simply understand you, and that major conflicts signal fundamental incompatibility rather than normal friction requiring honest communication. When problems arise, the fixed mindset response is to assign permanent labels. My partner is selfish, or cold, or not who I thought they were. And once a trait is labeled permanent, there's no route forward. Relationship researcher Daniel Weil puts it plainly: choosing a partner is choosing a set of problems. No one arrives problem-free. The question is whether two people can face their problems together, with honesty and a genuine commitment to understanding. The growth mindset in a relationship doesn't mean tolerating harm or pretending difficulty away. It means treating friction as a place where understanding can deepen, where the relationship can actually grow. One of the most practically important chapters in the book turns to where mindsets come from, and what parents, teachers, and coaches can actually do to shape them. Dweck's answer is both humbling and actionable. Mindsets are largely shaped by the messages we send to children in moments of success and failure, and we send these messages far more powerfully than we realize. She begins with praise, and this is where the research becomes genuinely counterintuitive. Most parents and teachers believe that telling children they are smart, talented, and naturally gifted builds their confidence and sets them up for success. The research shows, with striking consistency, that this kind of praise reliably produces the opposite of what we intend. In a series of studies that are now among the most replicated findings in educational psychology, Dweck gave 5th grade students a set of moderately challenging puzzles. After the first set, the students were praised in one of 2 ways. Half were told, "You must be very smart at this." The other half were told, "You must have worked really hard at this." Then all the students were offered a choice. Would they like to try another similar set, or a harder set from which they could learn more? Children praised for intelligence overwhelmingly chose the easy set. They wanted to keep looking smart. Children praised for effort overwhelmingly chose the harder set. They were oriented toward learning. Both groups then faced a genuinely difficult set of problems. The intelligence-praised students, when they struggled, interpreted the difficulty as evidence that they were not actually smart after all. Their enjoyment dropped sharply. Their persistence dropped. They became deflated. When asked afterward to report their scores to students at another school, nearly 40% of the intelligence-praised group lied, inflating their actual scores. The fixed mindset had made failure so threatening that deception felt preferable to honesty. The effort-praised students showed none of this. When they struggled, they leaned in rather than pulled back. Their enjoyment and persistence held steady through the hard problems. Many of them described the difficult section as their favorite part of the whole experience. The lesson is not that we should withhold all praise. The lesson is that we need to praise the process rather than the trait, the strategies a child used, the effort they sustained, the willingness to try again after something didn't work. Not "you are brilliant, but I can see how hard you worked to figure that out." Not "you are a natural, but look at all the different approaches you tried before you found the one that worked." These distinctions feel small in the moment, but they are the difference between a child who believes their worth is contingent on easy success and a child who believes their worth comes from genuine engagement. The same principle governs how we respond to failure. Dweck describes 9-year-old Elizabeth preparing for her first gymnastics competition, fully expecting to win a ribbon and coming home empty-handed. The tempting parental responses, telling her she was robbed by unfair judging, or that she is so talented she will certainly win next time, all share a single feature. They protect her from the truth that she hasn't yet earned what she wants. Elizabeth's father said something harder and more useful. The girls who won had been training longer and working harder. If this truly mattered to her, it would require real commitment. He sympathized with her disappointment, but he told her the truth. At the next major competition, Elizabeth won the overall championship. Not because she was told she was talented, but because she understood what it would take. Teachers send these same messages through the stories they tell about achievement. When Dweck showed students biographical information about famous mathematicians, she found that students who learned the mathematicians had been natural geniuses for whom everything came easily immediately became more fixed in their thinking about their own math ability. Students who learned that the same mathematicians had fallen in love with the subject and worked for years shifted toward growth. Children are continuously absorbing a theory of how ability works, and they absorb it from stories as readily as from direct praise. Dweck also addresses what she calls the false growth mindset, something she identified after the book became widely read. Schools and companies began claiming to embrace growth mindset principles without substantively changing how they responded to failure. They spoke the right language: effort matters, we learn from mistakes, while still structuring their environments around judgment and ranking. The growth mindset is not a vocabulary choice. It is a different orientation toward difficulty, and it has to be lived consistently to mean anything. The adults who genuinely help others develop it are the ones who model it themselves, who speak openly about their own struggles, who show genuine curiosity when things get hard, who make it clear through their own behavior that wrestling with difficulty is something to be proud of. The final chapter of mindset is the one people tend to return to most. It is about change, and Dweck is careful and honest about what real change actually involves. She begins with an important clarification. Changing your mindset is not like flipping a switch or having a sudden revelation that permanently reorganizes how you see the world. The fixed mindset voice does not disappear once you become aware of it. What happens instead is that new beliefs begin to take their place alongside the old ones. Over time, as you practice responding differently, the growth-minded response becomes more accessible and more natural, but the fixed mindset voice remains. The goal is not to eliminate it. The goal is to stop letting it drive. Dweck describes a practical 4-step process for working with this. The first step is learning to hear the fixed mindset voice clearly. It's the internal commentary that says, "You failed, which means you're not capable." Or, "If you try hard and still don't succeed, that would be unbearable." Most people have been hearing this voice for so long that it has become background noise, the water they swim in. Noticing it as a perspective, a habit of interpretation rather than simply the truth, that noticing is where the possibility of change begins. The second step is to acknowledge the voice without obeying it. You can hear it, recognize it for what it is, and then choose not to act from it. This sounds simple and in practice requires real repetition. The fixed mindset has often been a source of protection for a long time, a way of keeping yourself safe from the exposure of genuine effort. It won't give up its seat easily. The third step is to respond with a growth-oriented reframe, not a hollow positive affirmation, but a genuine inquiry. What can I learn from what just happened? What do I do next that would be useful? Dweck tells the story of a graduate student whose first major research paper was rejected by a leading journal. For weeks she could not bring herself to open the reviewer comments. The rejection felt too much like a verdict on her worth. Dweck reframed it. The reviewer's job is to find every possible problem with the paper. Your job is to learn from their critique and make the paper better. Within hours, the student was revising. The same document that had felt like evidence of her inadequacy became a set of solvable problems. Nothing had changed about the paper. Everything had changed about how she understood her relationship to it. The fourth step is making concrete and specific plans, because vague intentions almost never become action. Research by psychologist Peter Gollwitzer demonstrates that the difference between "I'm going to work on this" and "tomorrow evening after dinner I'm going to sit at the kitchen table and spend an hour working through the sections I don't yet understand" is enormous. The more specific and visual the plan, when, where, how, the more likely it gets carried out. This is not a minor scheduling detail. It is the mechanism by which good intentions connect to behavior. Dweck also developed and tested growth mindset workshops for junior high students, 8 sessions that taught these ideas and showed students how to apply them. The results were measurable. Students who went through the program showed clear grade improvement in the following semester. Students in a control group, taught excellent study skills without any mindset work, showed no improvement. Teachers who had no idea which students had been in which program spontaneously identified the growth mindset group as noticeably more motivated and engaged. One comparison worth mentioning, Grit by Angela Duckworth, covers similar territory from a slightly different angle. Where mindset focuses on the underlying belief, whether you think abilities can change, Grit focuses on the long-term behavioral output, sustained passion and perseverance over years and decades. Think of it this way: mindset is the soil, and grit is what grows in it. Mindset explains why effort feels worthwhile to some people and pointless to others. Grit describes what it looks like when that effort is sustained over a lifetime. An honest note before we close: the mindset framework, for all its genuine power, can be oversimplified in ways that cause harm. A child struggling because of inadequate teaching, a genuine learning difference, or systemic disadvantage does not simply need to be told to adopt a growth mindset. Effort matters, but effort without access and support can only take someone so far. The framework is most useful when it helps individuals respond well to genuine learning challenges. It becomes harmful when it places the entire burden of outcomes on individual psychology while ignoring the structures that shape what's possible. Dweck ends with something more like an invitation than a conclusion. The journey toward a growth mindset is not a destination you arrive at and relax into. It is a daily practice, a choice you make again and again, each time difficulty arrives, to be curious rather than defensive, to try rather than protect, to ask what can I learn from this rather than what does this say about me. A good practice to begin on a quiet night like this. Sleep well. And we'll see you at Whispering Pages for the next one.